What if the reason I am still able to rise from a chair at 96 has less to do with strength or discipline, and more to do with a quiet decision I made long ago to never fully stop moving? I am Rosen Miriam. I am 96 years old. I am not an athlete, and I never was. I did not grow up exercising, tracking steps, or pushing my body beyond its limits. For most of my life, I believed exercise belonged to the young, the disciplined, or the naturally strong. I believed that once the body slowed, movement was something you gradually surrendered. I was wrong. What I learned over decades is that the body does not require intensity to remain involved in life. It requires consistency. Small repeated acts of movement, standing, walking, stretching, shifting weight, kept my body familiar to me. Regular movement became my companion, not my challenge, not because it kept me alive in a medical sense, but because it helped me remain present and capable within the life I was given. I am not here to offer a method or a guarantee. I am here to share what I experienced. When movement disappeared from my days, my confidence disappeared with it. When I returned to gentle daily motion, something important came back. Not youth, not strength, but trust. Trust in my balance, trust in my legs, trust that my body was still participating in the day ahead of me. Exercise, for me, was never about improvement. It was about staying connected. It was about choosing not to withdraw from my own body as the years passed. And that choice, repeated quietly over time, shaped how I lived inside my aging body. Before going further, it is important to be precise about what this story does and does not mean. To be precise and honest, regular exercise must be understood within clear limits. Daily movement is not a medical treatment, a diagnostic tool, or a guarantee against disease. Exercise does not prevent all illness, does not stop biological aging, and does not ensure independence for every person. It cannot eliminate pain, reverse chronic conditions, or promise longevity. What regular movement can influence is functional capacity, confidence, and continuity, the ability to remain engaged with one's body and daily life for as long as possible. Aging remains complex and individual, shaped by genetics, environment, health history, and circumstance. Exercise supports participation in life. It does not control its outcome. By the time I reached my 60s, movement was no longer something that happened automatically. Earlier in life, motion was built into the day, walking to places, carrying things, standing for long hours without thinking about it. I never called it exercise then. It was simply living. What changed was not my understanding of health, but the shape of daily life. Chairs became more inviting. Convenience replaced effort. Slowly, without any clear decision, my world began to shrink. At first, the signs were subtle. I hesitated before standing. I noticed stiffness that lingered longer than it used to. I did not feel ill, but I felt cautious. That caution is important because it is often mistaken for wisdom. In truth, it can quietly become avoidance. I did not stop moving because I was incapable. I stopped because I was unsure. What brought me back to movement was not advice or motivation. It was discomfort with withdrawal. I realized that when I moved less, I trusted myself less. Standing felt like a negotiation. Walking felt like something to plan around. That loss of confidence mattered more to me than any physical symptom. So I began again, but not in the way people usually imagine. I did not join a class or set goals. I did not try to get fit. I simply asked myself a smaller question. What movement feels safe enough to repeat tomorrow? That question protected me from overreaching. It kept movement realistic. Some days that meant a short walk inside the house. Other days it meant standing at the counter and lifting one heel at a time. There were mornings when all I did was sit upright and move my arms slowly, reminding my shoulders they still belonged to me. None of this felt impressive. That was precisely why it lasted. I learned quickly that consistency has nothing to do with enthusiasm. Motivation came and went, as it always does. Routine stayed. I tied movement to ordinary moments, after waking, before meals, while waiting for water to boil. Exercise stopped being a separate activity and became part of how the day unfolded. When movement blends into life, it no longer competes with it. There were periods when my health was not steady. During illness or recovery, movement changed shape again. I did not stop. I adjusted. I moved in bed. I flexed my hands. I focused on breathing with intention. These moments were not symbolic. They mattered. They kept the connection between mind and body intact. I never treated rest as failure. I treated it as preparation. I also learned to be honest about limits. I did not push through sharp pain. I did not assume discomfort meant progress. At my age, listening mattered more than effort. Movement worked because it was cooperative. The body responds better to respect than to force, especially as it ages. Over time, something shifted. My body did not become younger, but it became more familiar. Standing felt less uncertain. Walking felt less fragile. These changes were modest, gradual, and uneven, but they were real. More importantly, they were enough. I did not need dramatic improvement. I needed reliability. I want to be clear here because clarity matters. This is not a formula and not a promise. It is simply what movement made possible in my own life. I watched others exercise more intensely than I ever did and still struggle with decline. I watch people move very little and age quickly. Life does not follow neat rules. My experience does not override anyone else's reality. What regular movement gave me was not control over aging, but participation in it. I stayed involved in my own days. I remained oriented inside my body instead of feeling like a passenger. That sense of involvement reduced fear. When you trust your ability to move, even gently, the world feels less threatening. There is a quiet dignity in staying engaged with your body. Exercise helped me preserve that dignity, not because it fixed anything, but because it prevented unnecessary retreat. I did not disappear from myself before I had to. As the years passed, movement stopped feeling like a habit and started feeling like a relationship. Some days were easy, some were not, but I showed up. And showing up again and again shaped how I experienced old age more than any single effort ever could. In the next part, I will explain the simple principles that kept this habit safe and sustainable across decades, and why even small, careful movement can remain meaningful later in life when approached without guarantees or illusions. By the time I reached my 70s, I no longer thought about exercise as something I did to change my body. I thought about it as something I did to remain in conversation with it. That shift in perspective mattered. When movement is framed as correction or improvement, it becomes temporary. When it is framed as maintenance of connection, it has a chance to last. The first principle I followed was simple. I never treated movement as a test. I did not ask my body to prove anything. At my age, testing leads to fear, and fear leads to avoidance. Instead, I approached movement as reassurance. Each small action told my body, "You are still needed." That message, repeated daily, kept withdrawal from taking hold. Another principle was protecting tomorrow. I never did so much today that I would be unable or unwilling to move again the next day. Overexertion steals continuity. I saw people push themselves hard, feel proud, and then disappear from movement for weeks. I chose to stop early, not late. Ending movement with energy left mattered more than finishing strong. I also learned to remove ceremony from exercise. When movement requires special clothing, special places, or special moods, it becomes fragile. Life will eventually interrupt it. I moved where I already was, near the bed, in the kitchen, along the hallway. This made movement ordinary. Ordinary things survive. Comparison was something I avoided deliberately. I did not compare myself to others my age, and I did not compare myself to who I once was. Comparison turns movement into judgment, and judgment drains energy. At 96, energy is precious. I measured success by presence, not progress. If I felt more at home in my body than I would have felt doing nothing, that was enough. There were also long stretches when movement felt slower than before. This is where precision matters. Movement can respond at any age, though the response is often gradual, limited, and deeply individual. Some weeks, improvement was noticeable. Other times, it was barely perceptible. I learned not to demand feedback. Movement does not owe us visible results to be worthwhile. I also respected rest, but I defined it carefully. Rest was intentional, not indefinite. I paused without quitting. There is an important difference. Quitting assumes failure. Pausing assumes continuation. Even during rest, I maintained some form of contact with my body, gentle breathing, small shifts, awareness. That contact prevented the sense of starting over. Fear deserves special attention. With age comes a fear of falling, of pain, of not recovering. Fear convinces people to become still in the name of safety. I learned that predictable, gentle movement actually reduced fear. When the body knows what to expect, the mind relaxes. Repetition creates trust. I want to be explicit here. Exercise did not protect me from illness. It did not prevent every decline. It did not guarantee independence. What it did was reduce unnecessary loss, the kind that comes from absence rather than age. It helped me maintain functional confidence for longer than I otherwise would have. Movement also affected my emotional state, though not in dramatic ways. It did not make me joyful or energized. It made me steady. Regular motion kept me from feeling trapped inside my own body. Even simple movements reminded me that I was still participating in the day, not merely enduring it. Over time, exercise stopped feeling like an activity and started feeling like presence. I was no longer doing movement, I was maintaining contact. That distinction changed how aging felt. Old age became something I inhabited, not something that happened to me from the outside. I did not extend life. I did not escape decline. I stayed connected. That connection shaped everything, from how I stood to how I walked to how I faced uncertainty. Movement gave me continuity when many other things became unpredictable. In the final part, I will explain what this way of moving ultimately meant to me, not as advice, not as instruction, but as a way of remaining engaged with life itself. Now, at 96, when I look back, I do not measure my life by how strong I became or how much I was able to do. I measure it by how present I remained. Regular movement did not give me control over aging, illness, or outcome. What it gave me was continuity, the ability to remain involved in my own days for as long as possible. Exercise did not keep me alive in a medical sense. It did not stop decline, and it did not protect me from loss. What it did was help me avoid unnecessary withdrawal. It kept my body familiar to me. It allowed me to trust my balance a little longer, to stand without hesitation more often than not, and to move through ordinary moments with less fear. I never chased youth or improvement. I simply refused to disappear from my own body before I had to. That choice mattered more than any routine ever could. Movement reminded me that participation does not require strength, only willingness. I want to be clear because clarity is important. This is not a formula and not a promise. It is simply what movement made possible in my own life. Others will age differently. Bodies respond differently. Circumstances matter. Nothing here guarantees a result. But I believe this. Choosing to move, even gently, is a way of choosing presence. It is a way of staying in conversation with life instead of stepping away from it. Regular movement helped me remain engaged, not because it changed the future, but because it shaped how I lived inside the present. If my experience offers anything at all, let it be this understanding. Exercise regularly does not mean exercise impressively. It means returning to your body again and again within your limits, without illusion and without surrender. As long as you are willing to move, even a little, you are still participating in life.